Hello, and welcome to PA122 Week 7. This week we are in Chapter 5 of the Advanced Pharmacy Practice book. So if you want to turn to that, we will go over some of that. Our discussion has to do with some subject matter in the chapter. So when I get to it, then we'll discuss that. But let's discuss Chapter 5 quickly. It's the roles of the pharmacist and the pharmacy technician in a long-term care facility. So a long-term care facility means that we are a pharmacy that is servicing nursing homes, jails, places that might not be quite a nursing home, but what they call a long-term facility. So there's nurses in the building that help dispense medications to a patient, basically. And so we have, and what it just says right here, we have the tremendous ability to affect residents' outcomes in a long-term care facilities. Pharmacists have been recognized as drug therapy experts and perform drug regimen reviews, this is what your discussion is about. So we'll kind of talk a little bit about that. So let's go in and talk a little bit about what that means. Review of the consultant pharmacy practice. The role of this begins during the 1960s when Medicare and Medicaid programs established the pharmacy service. There were some pharmacies at the time that recommended medication misuse, and as you know, older patients or can be Medicare patients have the tendency to not remember if they took their medications, or they get kind of confused. And so this can be a really big problem. And some of the reasons why they are then placed into a long-term facility is so that they can have their drug regimen on time, basically. So it is the role of the pharmacy technician and the pharmacist that we get those medications there, and they are delivered via bubble packs. So in a pharmacy where you are servicing long-term care facilities, you are putting medications in different bubble packs, whether they be 30-day, 60-day, or 90-day. 30, 60, 90 tablets. There are different bubble packs for each, and then you're sealing them with a heat seal. So if you can imagine, this does heat the medications up a little bit, and so your expiration date then changes from what is on the bottle to only a year in those bubble packs. Because again, it is leaving the pharmacy. We don't regulate the temperature at those long-term care facilities. It's supposed to be taken within those 30 days. So we can only say that the medication is good for about a year from the date that we dispense it. And so one thing that you have to put on your label when you are dispensing at a long-term care facility is the expiration date, a year from the day that you are filling it. And that's usually with any pharmacy. So you'll have patients who are saying, well, I got this, and you say, oh, well, the bottle does say 2020, but that we can't regulate when people take the drugs out of the pharmacy. They could be leaving it in their car. It could be in their bathroom where it gets very hot every single day because they're taking a shower. So usually it is a year after it leaves the pharmacy. Anyway, and so the nurses, instead of calling the doctors on call, a lot of them will call the pharmacist and say, what do you think about this? Because they are consultation pharmacists. They have a ton of drug history that they've taken in school, so they're using them to the best of their ability. And so it just talks a little bit about that in your chapter, so make sure that you do read that. It talks a little bit about what their management activities are, with controlled substances, things like that. We do stock also another machine. Sometimes it's called a Pyxis machine, a pull machine they'll call it. Some of the nurses do for drugs that are needed on an emergency basis. It usually comes in like one dose, so that then they can get a prescription for it. So if you have a resident who falls in the middle of the night and needs a pain medication right then and there, they can call the pharmacist and say, what do you think? Can I do that? And so that means the pharmacist actually has to be on call so that then the nurse can give it. Then she can call the doctor the next day and said, hey, we had to give an oxycodone last night to Virginia down the hall. Can you get me a prescription? And then they can write it in that way. So that's the only difference, is that a pharmacist can authorize the first dose of that medication if they can't get a hold of the doctor. Drug regimen review, page 103. This is what your discussion is about. So let's just kind of define that quickly. It's the process of reviewing of all residents' medications and corresponding medical information. And so here again, we are going in to the facility, and sometimes a pharmacy technician follows the pharmacist because that's a lot of medication. Some of these people, some of these long-term care facilities have 300 beds, and so they have 300 different medications, and that's just if they have one, which, you know, they usually have more than one. And so we have to check that they're giving them properly, that if we had a dose that went out the first of the month and it's the middle of the month, that half of them are taken. And if they're not, why aren't they? And are there any medications laying around that are old? We need to take those back and get rid of them. So they can do this quarterly. They can do this every other month. I knew a long-term care facility that the pharmacist went out monthly because he had to go to all of his facilities, but you know, it came around that it was just quarterly to the one facilities. But as frequently as necessary is needed, and if you're hearing some background on, hey, that, you know, their medications are messed up, then we need to go in and do some things like that. It's a general review of drug regimen review, involves an overview of individual residents' medication therapy to ensure appropriate medication use and look for any medication use problems. A focused review is a drug regimen review that concentrates on specific medications, their class. So if I'm just looking for controlled substances, medication problem. An example would be a drug regimen that is focused on diabetes residents. What are they taking? Are they all on the same thing? Are they all on different? That kind of stuff. Okay, so I am running out of time. I don't want to keep you forever, but there is a medication pass observation report that you do have to fill out when you do your review. So that would be good to look at. That's on page 109. And then we go into the alternative to long-term care settings, and then what does the pharmacy technician do? And that is on page 112. That talks a little bit more in detail than what I just talked about in my lecture here. So make sure that you look at that. Then your assignment, just quickly, is the self-assessed questions at the end of your chapter. Make sure that you do those. And then it also includes the critical thinking. So under the assignment, it says, here's a download of what it's due. You can download that, obviously, or you can just look in your book. It's here as well. So just all of the end of the chapter review questions. Then you submit it, please, in a Word document so that I can open it. And then you also have a discussion question, again, due by Wednesday, an assignment, and also a quiz. So make sure that you take that this week. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and talk to you soon.